Okay folks, I promised you that we were going to show you something really special and really cool. You're looking at an Aeolian Wind Harp set up on Hudson Lake here at the Dark Preserve. Look at that. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this, folks. Here in a few minutes I'm going to introduce you to my friend Mr. Steve Cameron. He's the guy that made this Aeolian Wind Harp. Steve's from www.windharps.net. Listen. It's playing, folks. Listen. When the wind goes through that device, it makes the strings vibrate on that box that's hanging right there. You just heard it. That was an Aeolian Wind Harp. Fabulous. My name's the Raven. You're watching Internet TV, folks. You're listening to an Aeolian Wind Harp. Okay folks, you're listening to an Aeolian Wind Harp. I'm going to introduce you to my friend right here, the guy that made this device, Mr. Steve Cameron. Hey
Hi.
Steve.
How you doing today? I'm Steve Cameron, your friendly neighborhood Aeolian harp maker. Probably none of you have ever heard of an Aeolian harp, or maybe you have. You've read about it someplace, somewhere in literature. They have inspired poets, authors, and composers for centuries. People such as Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Shelley, Chopin. The list just goes on and on and on. I got interested in these harps several years ago. I'm a geologist by trade, and I was pursuing another degree. I wanted to ultimately get my master's in geology. So I went back to school and they said that I needed to have some arts credits. And I went, oh, I'm not an artist, but I guess if I really have to, I'll take some arts credits. So I looked through the lists and there was a course called Creativity and Imagination. It was a very well put together course, and what it was an overview history of how people became inspired to do things, to create, to craft music, to craft poetry, literature, etc. over the centuries. Well, this course went back to the ancient Greeks, and they talked about the Greek muses. There were 9 Greek muses. And the muses, if no one has heard of that, is where we get our modern word music from. Anyways, the Greek muse Terpsichore carried an Aeolian harp, and she was the muse of lyrical dance and music. So when you got your muse, you were inspired to create. In this instance, you were inspired to create dance, you were inspired to create music. Well, the Aeolian harp, being the only strung instrument that is played untouched by human hands, was considered a gift from the gods by the Greeks. So Terpsichore would come and play her Aeolian harp for you to inspire you to create music. Now, that's a little bit of the beginning of it. What they learned and how they came across the idea of the Aeolian harp was that they listened to the wind blowing across the sinew of dead animals. Well, there are several references throughout history to the Aeolian harp in mythology, in lore, in all kinds of different places. Then, the first first documentation that we find about the Aeolian harp comes from 1530. It's a guy named Della Porta, and he wrote a book called Natural Magic. And in it he described these instruments that were played untouched by human hands. And he described the melodies that came across them. The text is in Latin. It is actually available through Google Books, and if you wander through my website, windharps.net, you will find links to my Google Reader library, Google Books library, and there are references in there to where you can actually see the original text of Della Porta from 1530. Well, it kind of disappears for a little bit. We can't find a whole lot of information, few things hither and skither, but what happened was in 1650 there was a Jesuit priest in Rome called Athanasius Kircher,